The air was tense, thick with the chatter of bystanders and the occasional honk of passing cars. Jonathan Roumie had just arrived at the square, a calm presence among a growing crowd of fans, camera phones, and curious onlookers. He smiled politely, greeting a few people as he walked, signing autographs with effortless patience. His demeanor was quiet, respectful, the kind that makes everyone feel noticed, no matter how small or large their presence. But not everyone appreciated calmness. Not today. A police officer appeared on the scene, his steps quick and purposeful, eyes narrowing as he took in the growing cluster of people. Jonathan, completely unaware of the officer's brewing frustration, continued interacting politely with the fans. And then it happened. "Sir," the officer barked, his voice cutting sharply through the hum of the crowd. "Do you even know what you're doing?" The crowd went silent. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Phones hovered mid-air as people turned to see what was happening. Jonathan looked up slowly, his calm gaze meeting the officer's stern expression. There was no flinch, no trace of fear. Only quiet attentiveness. For a moment, the officer seemed shocked that no panic or argument followed. "You need to move. This is public property, and you're blocking it," he added, louder this time, gesturing impatiently toward the edges of the square. Jonathan took a measured breath. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, his expression gentle but firm. "Officer, I understand your concern," he said. "I truly do. I'm happy to move wherever you need me to. But I hope we can do this with respect, for everyone here." The officer's eyes widened slightly, caught off guard by the calmness, the politeness, the unexpected composure. The crowd whispered among themselves, recording, amazed. Here was a man facing authority, tension rising around him, and yet his response didn't escalate the situation, it diffused it. And just like that, the square seemed to hold its breath. No one knew how the officer would respond. No one knew what would happen next. But in that frozen moment, Jonathan Roumie had already made an impression no harsh word could erase. Everyone watching felt it, the power of humility, the quiet strength of respect, and the shock that comes when someone refuses to meet anger with anger. The city square was alive with its usual Monday afternoon energy. Street vendors called out their specials, children ran laughing after stray pigeons, and commuters hurried past, briefcases in hand. In the midst of it all, Jonathan Roumie stood out, not because he demanded attention, but because people naturally gravitated toward him. There was a quiet aura around him, a sense of calm authority that made even strangers feel comfortable. Fans had started gathering, cameras held high, asking politely for pictures, autographs, and a few words. Jonathan smiled at each person, patiently signing, chatting, and sometimes offering a small joke or encouraging word. His demeanor was gentle, yet there was a strength beneath it, an unspoken confidence that demanded respect, not by force, but by example. Yet, the world doesn't always respond to calm. Sometimes, it responds with impatience. From the corner of the square, a uniformed officer approached, his boots clicking sharply against the pavement. Officer Davis, a man in his late 30s with a reputation for strict enforcement and zero tolerance for crowds, scanned the gathering. His face hardened as he noticed the growing cluster around Jonathan. He had been dealing with traffic, city regulations, and a morning full of complaints. And now, this scene, a crowd forming seemingly without concern for rules or order. Davis marched forward, his steps confident, eyes narrowing. He didn't pause to assess the situation. His mind was already in enforcement mode. As he reached the edge of the gathering, he called out in a tone that brooked no discussion. "Sir, you need to clear this area immediately. You're blocking pedestrian traffic." Jonathan looked up slowly. The calm smile never wavered. He didn't flinch. He didn't step back. Instead, he made eye contact, acknowledging the concern without confrontation. "I understand, officer," Jonathan said in a soft, measured voice, the kind that commands attention without shouting. "I truly do. I want to make sure everyone is safe and that the rules are respected. Can you tell me exactly where I should move so that I'm not causing a problem?" The officer's brow furrowed. Usually, people reacted defensively, argued, or tried to slip past his authority. But Jonathan's response was different, polite, respectful, and firm. It didn't undermine the officer, it invited collaboration. Move to the corner over there. Now, the officer barked, gesturing impatiently toward a narrow walkway. His tone carried the weight of frustration. It wasn't just about the crowd, it was about control. The officer prided himself on authority, and here was a man calmly standing his ground without challenging it. Jonathan nodded. Absolutely. I'll move. Thank you for letting me know, he said. Slowly, he began guiding the group toward the designated spot, ensuring the fans followed without causing a disturbance. Every step he took was deliberate, calm, and careful. The crowd whispered among themselves, recording on phones, some astonished. This wasn't just a celebrity moment, it was a lesson in composure, patience, and respect. Children watched wide-eyed as Jonathan handled authority without aggression. Adults exchanged glances, impressed by his ability to diffuse tension effortlessly. Even some nearby vendors paused, silently acknowledging his poise. Officer Davis, however, was still uneasy. He didn't know how to respond to such humility. Usually, he would have shouted, threatened, or forced compliance. Instead, he was forced to reassess. Here was a man following his instructions, yet his quiet confidence suggested a strength far greater than shouting could convey. Jonathan continued to speak softly to the crowd. "Thank you, everyone, for cooperating," he said. "Let's make sure we respect the space and each other." His words carried weight because they were sincere. There was no showmanship, no arrogance, just kindness and calm leadership. For a brief moment, the city square seemed to pause. The usual chaos, the honking cars, shouting vendors, and chattering pedestrians, felt muted in comparison to the silent respect that had grown around him. The officer, still watching closely, couldn't help but notice how people were reacting. Some were relieved that the tension had not escalated, others were inspired by Jonathan's behavior. Finally, after a few more careful steps, Jonathan and the crowd reached the designated area. There was still tension in the air, but it had shifted. No longer was it a scene of confrontation, it had become a scene of mutual respect. The officer relaxed slightly, though he wouldn't admit it aloud. He had encountered authority before, but never in this quiet, dignified way. Jonathan gave a final nod to the officer. "I hope this works for you. If there's anything else I should know, please tell me." His voice remained calm, confident, and respectful, a stark contrast to the officer's impatience. The officer hesitated, then muttered, almost reluctantly, "That's fine. Just keep it orderly." Jonathan smiled, a soft, reassuring smile. "Of course. Thank you." As the officer walked away, the crowd exhaled collectively. Phones lowered, whispers filled the square, and everyone watching felt the lesson, that strength is not always loud, that authority can be met with grace, and that respect often speaks louder than confrontation. And in that moment, Jonathan Roumie had already changed the mood of the square, leaving an impression that no one present would soon forget. Even after moving to the designated area, the atmosphere in the square remained charged. The crowd lingered, cameras raised, some whispering, others holding their breath in anticipation. Jonathan Roumie had managed to defuse part of the tension, but Officer Davis wasn't ready to let the matter go. His frustration simmered just beneath the surface, like a storm waiting to break. "Sir," Davis barked again, his voice sharper this time. "I told you to clear the area, and I expect compliance immediately. No exceptions." Jonathan turned slowly, facing the officer fully, his posture relaxed but unwavering. The calm in his eyes seemed almost unnatural in the face of such aggression. "Officer," he began, his voice steady, "I am complying. I have moved as requested. I want to make sure we do this safely for everyone here, and that no one is put at risk. Can we focus on safety together?" The officer's face reddened. He was used to people arguing, making excuses, or pretending not to hear him, but not this. Not a calm, respectful dialogue that subtly reminded him that he was, in fact, in the wrong for the tone he had taken. His authority, which usually elicited fear or submission, was meeting patience and poise instead. And it unsettled him. "You think being polite changes anything?" Davis snapped, taking a step closer. "You're still causing a problem. Step aside now, or I'll have to take further action." Some of the crowd murmured nervously. A few stepped back instinctively, worried about an escalation. Phones hovered in mid-air, recording every moment. Others, however, watched with fascination. There was a magnetic pull in Jonathan's calmness. Every word, every gesture communicated control, dignity, and patience, a rare kind of power that could command attention without force. Jonathan exhaled slowly, a measured breath that seemed to quiet the chaos around them. "Officer," he said gently, "I respect your role. You're here to keep things orderly, and I understand that. But respect works both ways. If we speak to each other with understanding, the situation will resolve faster than if we resort to anger." For a moment, the officer froze, blinking rapidly. His jaw tightened, and the tension in the square escalated. The contrast between the shouting officer and the composed man in front of him created a palpable energy. Everyone watching felt it, the collision of authority and humility, aggression and restraint. You think you can lecture me?" Davis barked, pointing a finger at Jonathan. "I don't take orders from anyone. You move where I tell you, do you understand?" Jonathan did not flinch. He took a single calm step closer, closing the gap without threatening anyone. His voice remained steady, even soft. "Yes, officer. I understand. I will follow your instructions. But please understand me as well. My intention is not to defy you. I am here to cooperate, to respect both you and the people around us. Can we find a solution together?" The officer's finger wavered. He was unprepared for this. He had expected defiance, resistance, fear, but not this quiet, unshakable strength. The crowd, sensing the shift, leaned in closer. Cameras clicked. People whispered in astonishment. The moment had transformed into something bigger than just a dispute. It had become a lesson in character, control, and the unexpected power of humility. Do you really think words will calm this?" Davis growled, exhaling sharply. "It doesn't work like that." Jonathan's gaze never left the officer's eyes. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the calmest response has the loudest impact. Sometimes, a patient heart can change the course of anger more than shouting ever could." The words hit the officer like a splash of cold water. He stumbled over what to say next, his authority challenged not by confrontation, but by quiet composure. The crowd could almost feel the officer's inner conflict, the fight between ego and reason, impatience and understanding. At that moment, a small child in the crowd tugged at his parent's sleeve, whispering nervously, "Why is he being so nice? The officer is so mad." The words, innocent yet pointed, seemed to echo the sentiment of everyone present. It wasn't about compliance or rules anymore. It was about respect, integrity, and self-control. Jonathan glanced around the square, acknowledging the crowd's presence with a soft smile, then returned his focus to the officer. "I am here to cooperate," he said once more. "I am not your enemy. But neither should we treat each other harshly when we can choose understanding instead." The officer's hands shook slightly, caught between maintaining authority and confronting an undeniable truth. The square seemed suspended in time. The tension reached its peak. Every bystander, every fan, every pedestrian could sense that something extraordinary was happening, a confrontation not resolved by power or anger, but by patience, respect, and inner strength. And in that pause, as the officer struggled to regain control, Jonathan's calm presence left an impression no harsh word could erase. The moment was set, poised for the response that would shock everyone present, including the officer himself. The square seemed to hold its breath. Even the usual hum of the city, the chatter of pedestrians, the distant honks of traffic, the call of street vendors, felt muted. All eyes were on Jonathan Roumie and Officer Davis, locked in a tense standoff. The officer's face was flushed, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he struggled to maintain authority. The crowd, equally tense, recorded every moment on their phones, sensing that they were about to witness something extraordinary. "Do you understand me?" Davis snapped, the sharp edge in his voice betraying his growing frustration. "Move now, or I'll have to." Jonathan raised a hand, a simple gesture that halted the officer mid-sentence. It wasn't confrontational, it was measured, calm, commanding in its restraint. Then, in a voice that was quiet yet carried unmistakable authority, he spoke. "Officer, I do understand you. I understand the rules, the responsibility you carry, and the pressure of your role. But I also understand that we all deserve respect, no matter our position. Right now, yelling does not make anyone safer, it only spreads tension." The words struck the officer like a hammer. He blinked, momentarily speechless, caught off guard by both the clarity and the composure in Jonathan's tone. The crowd stirred, whispering among themselves. "Did he just say that?" one woman asked, holding her phone high. Another man nodded slowly, shaking his head in disbelief. Jonathan continued, stepping forward deliberately, but never invading space or threatening anyone. Every movement was precise, controlled, almost like choreography. "I am not here to defy you, Officer Davis. I am here to cooperate fully. But cooperation does not require fear. Authority does not require anger. Respect requires understanding. And understanding requires patience." The officer's jaw tightened. His training had taught him to assert control, to meet resistance with force. Yet here was a man, standing calmly in front of him, facing tension without anger, wielding patience like a shield. Davis felt an unfamiliar unease creep in, an almost dizzying realization that this man's power did not come from confrontation, yet it was undeniable. A hush fell over the square. Children stopped fidgeting. Vendors paused mid-sentence. Even the pigeons seemed to quiet their cooing. Every bystander could feel the tension stretch into something almost sacred, a lesson unfolding in real time, one that went beyond rules or authority. Jonathan looked directly at Davis, his eyes steady, unwavering. "If you choose to escalate this with anger," he said softly, "then no one wins. But if we choose respect, even in disagreement, we all win. Right now, you have a choice." The words hung in the air like a tangible presence. The officer's hands twitched, his instinct to command wrestling with a deeper understanding that had been awakened in him in just a few short minutes. Around them, the crowd held its breath, sensing that something profound was happening, a moment where patience and humility confronted raw authority and perhaps began to transform it. Then, without warning, Jonathan did something the entire square had not anticipated. Instead of raising his voice, pleading, or backing away, he extended a hand, not in challenge, not in submission, but in an unmistakable gesture of peace and understanding. "Let's solve this together," he said quietly, yet every ear could hear him. "You have your duty. I have mine. And we can honor both without conflict." The officer froze. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. People gasped quietly, the sound almost lost in the collective awe of the crowd. He had expected argument, resistance, maybe even fear. What he did not expect was humility wrapped in quiet authority, a strength that was not aggressive, yet undeniable. Davis lowered his raised hand slowly, his breathing uneven. The anger that had dominated his expression just moments ago began to fade, replaced by something new, reflection. Every bystander noticed it. The tension that had threatened to explode into chaos dissolved, replaced by a strange, almost reverent silence. Jonathan smiled softly, still calm, still composed. "I am here to follow the rules, and I respect you for upholding them," he said. "But I ask only that we treat each other with the same dignity we expect from everyone else." The square seemed to exhale collectively. Phones were lowered, whispers of admiration filled the air, and even the officer's stance softened. People later described the moment as magical, as if a simple conversation had shifted the energy of the entire square. Jonathan Roumie had not shouted, had not demanded compliance. Instead, he had chosen calm, clarity, and respect, and in doing so, he had achieved something far more powerful than any argument could have done. In that moment, the officer nodded slowly, almost reluctantly, but genuinely. "All right, you're right," Davis admitted, his voice quieter now, tinged with a mixture of relief and awe. "Let's do this the right way." The crowd erupted, not in chaos, but in applause and murmurs of amazement. Children clapped shyly. Adults exchanged impressed glances. Phones buzzed with notifications, videos already going viral. And in the middle of it all, Jonathan Roumie remained calm, guiding the group, ensuring safety, and leaving a lesson that no one in that square would ever forget. It was not just a resolution, it was a revelation. The crowd was still buzzing with whispers, murmurs, and flashes from phones capturing every detail. Jonathan Roumie had turned what could have been a heated confrontation into a lesson in patience, humility, and respect. But even as the tension in the square eased, a new wave of curiosity rippled through the onlookers. People exchanged glances, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "Who is this guy?" someone whispered. "He didn't even argue, and the officer actually listened." Another voice murmured, "I've never seen someone handle that so calmly. It's like he owns the room without even trying." Even Officer Davis, now standing a few feet away, was visibly shaken. He had gone from anger to disbelief in mere minutes. He had enforced the law countless times, faced resistance, and handled authority situations that tested his patience. But nothing had prepared him for the serene strength Jonathan displayed. It was disarming, humbling, and somehow inspiring all at once. The crowd began to disperse slowly, but some stayed close, murmuring among themselves. "I can't believe he stayed calm the whole time," a young woman said. "I would have lost it, or screamed back," her friend replied. "But he handled it differently. It's like he teaches without even saying he's teaching." Meanwhile, a few keen-eyed bystanders who had been observing more closely began to whisper to one another, recognizing the face. "Wait, isn't that Jonathan Roumie? From The Chosen?" one man asked, pointing discreetly. "That's him, isn't it?" Others confirmed, their excitement growing. The crowd that remained shifted from admiration of the interaction to awe at the realization that they were witnessing a celebrity, not just a figure on screen, but someone embodying the principles of patience and humility in real life. Just as the buzz settled, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The engine cut off, and 3 people in professional attire stepped out, carrying folders and documents. They scanned the square, clearly searching for someone. "Jonathan Roumie," one of them called out, urgency in their voice. "We've been trying to reach you." The crowd watched in silent anticipation. The man who had been calm, composed, and respectful, the man who had just diffused a tense encounter with authority, now turned to face the newcomers. "Is this him?" a bystander asked aloud, whispering to the person next to them. "That's Jonathan Roumie?" "Yes," another confirmed, nodding. "That's definitely him." Jonathan walked toward the approaching professionals, still calm and collected. The excitement in the square escalated. People started recording, phones raised once more. The aura around him seemed almost magnetic. One of the executives, speaking quickly, said, "Mr. Roumie, congratulations. Your leadership, your composure, and your presence have been recognized. We'd like to formally welcome you to the board. Your vision and integrity are exactly what we need." The words hung in the air. The crowd whispered in astonishment. Jonathan, the same man who had just calmly diffused a confrontation with a police officer, was now stepping into a role of authority on an even larger scale. "Wait, does that mean?" Officer Davis stammered, still trying to process the shift in dynamics. His earlier authority, which had felt unshakable moments ago, now seemed almost insignificant in comparison to the quiet power Jonathan wielded effortlessly. "Yes," the executive continued. "Jonathan Roumie has been appointed to oversee this new initiative. His ability to inspire, lead, and resolve conflict with calm authority makes him the perfect fit." The crowd erupted in soft cheers and murmurs of admiration. Some clapped. Others simply stared, awestruck. It wasn't just celebrity recognition. It was a revelation that true strength and leadership often came in quiet, measured doses, far removed from aggression or ego. Jonathan turned briefly to the officer and the bystanders. His expression was calm, humble, and kind. "Thank you for allowing me to demonstrate respect today," he said softly, looking at Officer Davis. "Leadership isn't about shouting. It's about understanding and guiding." Officer Davis, visibly humbled, nodded slowly, swallowing hard. The tension, which had once seemed insurmountable, had been replaced by reflection, respect, and a deep awareness of what he had just witnessed. For the people in the square, the lesson was unmistakable. True authority is not claimed through fear or aggression, it is earned through patience, respect, and integrity. And sometimes, the person who appears calm and unassuming can be the one who leaves the greatest mark on everyone around them. As Jonathan walked away with the executives, the crowd began to disperse, carrying with them a story they would tell for months, if not years. A story not just about celebrity, but about humility, power, and the astonishing impact of a measured, respectful response in the face of harshness. The square was slowly returning to its usual rhythm, but the energy lingered. People who had been mere bystanders moments ago now felt like witnesses to something extraordinary. Jonathan Roumie had handled a tense encounter with authority in a way that left everyone, even the officer, reconsidering what strength and respect truly meant. But the story was far from over. Officer Davis stood to the side, hands on his hips, staring after Jonathan and the executives as they walked away. He could feel the weight of what had just happened pressing down on him, not just professionally, but personally. For years, he had relied on authority and command to maintain control, believing that intimidation and strictness were the fastest ways to achieve compliance. Today, all of that had been challenged in the calmest, most disarming way imaginable. He exhaled deeply, running a hand across his forehead. His anger and frustration had melted into reflection. The officer realized something he hadn't fully acknowledged before: power and respect are not the same. Authority can demand obedience, but respect must be earned. And humility often carries a strength far more lasting than loudness or aggression. Meanwhile, the crowd that remained began to disperse slowly. People exchanged stories, replaying moments in their minds. "Did you see how he didn't even raise his voice?" one teenager said, eyes wide. "I've never seen someone handle authority like that before." "I know," replied her friend. "He wasn't just polite. He made the officer actually listen. That's incredible." From the corner of the square, a few vendors nodded, agreeing silently. They had seen many conflicts escalate over the years, sometimes violently, but Jonathan had diffused what could have been a chaotic scene with nothing more than composure, patience, and understanding. It was a display of quiet power that no one could ignore. As Jonathan and the executives entered a nearby building, he took a moment to speak privately with one of them. "Thank you," he said softly. "Today was a reminder that leadership starts with humility and respect. That's what people remember." The executive nodded, understanding the deeper message. "Exactly," they replied. "And it's why we knew you were the right person for this role. People don't just follow orders, they follow example." Back outside, Officer Davis watched the crowd disperse and slowly walked over to the small group of fans who had lingered. He knelt slightly to meet their gaze. I misjudged him," he admitted quietly. "I thought authority meant shouting or forcing compliance. But I was wrong. There's strength in patience, and power in respect." The crowd murmured in agreement. A few nodded, some smiled. Even children seemed to sense the shift in the officer's demeanor. It was as if the entire square had absorbed a lesson that no words on a page could capture: that true leadership and influence come not from ego or aggression, but from calm, consistent integrity. Meanwhile, Jonathan, now formally stepping into his new role, walked through the halls of the building with a sense of quiet purpose. He didn't boast about what had happened, nor did he dwell on the officer's earlier harshness. Instead, he focused on what mattered: leading with respect, guiding by example, and ensuring that his actions reflected the principles he believed in deeply. In the weeks that followed, the story of that afternoon spread far beyond the city square. Videos went viral online. Articles praised his composure. Social media buzzed with admiration and reflection. But for Jonathan, the significance wasn't fame, it was the subtle shift he had inspired. Officer Davis, colleagues, fans, and even casual observers were reminded that humility and respect can transform conflict in ways that anger never can. Back in the square, the atmosphere had changed. The local vendors noticed people behaving more thoughtfully. Passers-by seemed more considerate of one another. It was a small, almost imperceptible ripple, but one that carried the mark of the lessons Jonathan had imparted that day. Later, reflecting privately, Jonathan thought about the encounter. He realized that moments like these, moments when patience meets provocation, define character far more than everyday comfort or applause. The officer had been harsh, yes, but the true test was not his anger, it was Jonathan's response. And in choosing calm over confrontation, he had left a mark deeper than any shout or argument ever could. Sometimes, he thought, the quietest action speaks the loudest. And as the sun began to set, painting the city in gold, Jonathan walked away from the square, not as a man who had won a confrontation, but as someone who had reminded an entire community of a simple truth: respect is earned through humility, strength is demonstrated through patience, and leadership is measured not by command, but by example. The city square had long returned to its normal rhythm, Yet the memory of that afternoon lingered in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. Jonathan Roumie's encounter with Officer Davis had been brief, almost ordinary on the surface, but the lessons it carried were extraordinary. It wasn't about fame, confrontation, or even authority. It was about something much deeper: respect, humility, and the quiet power that comes from them. In the days following the incident, videos of the encounter spread across social media like wildfire. People watched, rewatched, and shared clips of Jonathan calmly facing a harsh authority figure, his voice steady, his posture calm, and his message clear. Comments poured in from around the world. "I wish I had handled that situation like him." "That's real strength, calm in chaos." "Humility is power, and he proved it." But beyond the viral clips and the online praise, the true impact was more subtle. Officer Davis, once tense and rigid in his approach to authority, reflected deeply on what had happened. He realized that his role was not just to enforce rules but to inspire trust, guide with fairness, and lead with integrity. The encounter had forced him to reconsider the way he treated others, the way he spoke to people under his authority, and even how he measured strength. For the crowd who had been present that day, the lesson was immediate and personal. Children saw that anger and yelling do not command respect. Adults realized that patience and humility could disarm even the harshest criticism. Vendors, commuters, and fans alike carried the story in their hearts, recognizing that a single moment of calm could ripple out, influencing attitudes, interactions, and even the small, everyday choices they made about how they treated others. Jonathan himself never sought recognition for what had occurred. To him, the encounter was simply a reflection of his principles, a chance to act in alignment with his values when challenged. Leadership, he understood, isn't about exerting dominance. It isn't about being loud or forcing compliance. True leadership is about showing the right way through actions, demonstrating integrity even when no one is watching, and treating everyone with dignity regardless of status or circumstance. He often reflected on that moment with a quiet smile, remembering the tension in the officer's eyes, the silent awe of the crowd, and the small, almost imperceptible shift that had occurred in the square. It was a reminder that respect is not something demanded. It is something earned through consistency, patience, and humility. Even when faced with harshness, the choice to respond with composure can create change far more profound than anger ever could. The moral was clear. In life, we will encounter moments that test our patience, challenge our values, or provoke us with harshness and disrespect. In those moments, it is easy to react impulsively, to shout, argue, or attempt to assert dominance. But the real strength lies in restraint, in responding thoughtfully, and in leading by example rather than force. Humility is not weakness. It is a power that transforms tension into understanding and conflict into cooperation. Jonathan's actions that day reminded everyone that the quietest response can be the loudest, the most composed can command the most attention, and the most respectful can earn the most loyalty. The city square had become a living classroom, a place where strangers witnessed the profound impact of character and composure. And even long after the cameras were put away and the crowd dispersed, the lesson remained: respect is timeless, humility is universal, and true strength is measured by how we act under pressure. As the sun set over the city, painting the streets in gold, the memory of that encounter lingered not as a story of conflict, but as a story of transformation. People told it to friends, to family, and to colleagues, passing on the lesson that leadership and influence do not come from shouting, but from understanding. That power is not in dominating others, but in elevating them. That respect is not about hierarchy, but about empathy and consistency. For those who witnessed it, and those who heard of it later, the story of Jonathan Roumie and Officer Davis became more than just a viral moment. It became a blueprint for how to live with integrity in a world that often rewards the loudest voice. It reminded everyone that in every interaction, we have a choice: to escalate or to de-escalate, to insult or to uplift, to react with ego or respond with grace. And as people shared the story across social media, conversations began to shift. Comments flowed in from every corner of the globe. Respect isn't just a word, it's a lifestyle. Humility really is the strongest power. I want to be like that. Jonathan's encounter became a symbol that true influence is quiet, that leadership is measured in respect, and that character is revealed in how we respond when challenged. It left everyone with a single, undeniable truth. The person you meet with patience, humility, and respect may be the very person who inspires the greatest change, not only in you, but in the world around you. Type respect in the comments if you believe humility is true strength, and remember, Every moment is an opportunity to lead by example, no matter who is watching.